was on a business trip to Vancouver, British Columbia. It was March 31st, 1998. I get a call from my sister. And I knew this call was eventually coming, but I was dreading the day that I would get it. My dad had been battling a 18-month struggle with tuberculosis, and we all knew that the end was near. And she says to me, "Bobby, I think you need to come home. I don't know if he's gonna make it." And my heart just sank. And that same week, I had a trip scheduled to Colorado Springs to go to a friend's wedding. And I had already made plans to go visit my dad in New Mexico after the wedding. And I told my sister that, hey, look, I'm going to look into changing my plans. I'll get there as soon as I can. I'll let you know tomorrow. And so the next morning, before I started shifting things around, I decided to call my dad and check in on him. And after he reassured me that he was okay, I told him that I'll be there later tonight. Dad, I'm changing my flight. I'll get there as soon as I can. And he just went silent on me. And my dad had this pregnant pause, and he was very comfortable with silence. And I had felt this pregnant pause many times growing up, and it usually meant that you're about to do something that I disagree with. And he then says to me, "Son, don't you have a wedding to go to this weekend?" And I said, "Yes, I do, but my friend will totally understand. Like, Dad, I got to get there to see you." Another pregnant pause. And then he asked me, "Son, did you give him your word?" And I said, "Sí, Papa." And he says, "You have to go to that wedding." And I just started begging him to listen to me, that, "Dad, I have to go see you." But he wasn't going to hear any of it. And he went as far as to tell me that I'm welcome to change the plans, but if I do show up there, he's not going to allow me in the hospital room. That's how serious he was about us keeping our word. And we had learned that the hard way growing up. And I knew that he meant it. And I reluctantly kept my plans to go to the wedding. And I left the next day. It was a Thursday, and that was one of the longest flights of my life. And I knew that entire time that I had made a choice that I would forever regret if something happened to my dad. And I get to the hotel, and I settle in, and I call to check in on him, and he reassures me again that he's going to be okay. And I, stayed for the next couple of days, had a great time at the wedding with my friends, but this whole time I was worried about my dad. And I ended up going to see him that Sunday, and he was okay, and I spent the following week with him by his bedside. But he showed me again the valuable lesson that he had showed me many times growing up, the value of doing what you say you're going to do and keeping your word. As a leader, we often find ourselves focused on accountability and making sure that our teams that we're guiding are doing what we all say we're going to do. And that gift that I got from the struggle with my dad was the value and the premium of choosing the hardest right and keeping your word even when it's difficult. And as a leader, we have to make those types of choices every day. And I found, as I was building my company, Populous Group, as we were starting to grow and things were getting turbulent, I found myself giving myself slack with the little things. Sometimes it was being 5 minutes late for a meeting, or taking a bit longer to return a call that I knew I needed to return. However, those little things are cumulative. And as we grew and things got more turbulent, I realized that this was eroding the single most important asset that I have as a leader, and that's trust. And so I had to reassess my behavior and the choices I was making, because it all starts with the example that I model. And I found myself emulating the C-suite dogma of the high-flying executive that does give themselves too much slack. And they think that their people are there to serve them, and that it's okay to be late. It's okay for them to serve them. That's not the way leadership works. People do what people see. And I wasn't giving them and showing them the example that my dad showed me. He always made me choose the hardest right over the easiest wrong, even when his life was at stake. And I'll never forget that lesson. He made me keep my word, and that forever changed how I looked at the premium that I place on building trust with those that have chosen to follow you. When leaders are struggling with something similar that I faced, I often encourage them to ask themselves what I did. And that is, how am I intentionally building trust with my team? Because just by asking yourself that question, you're going to have to self-reflect and assess your behavior and assess the choices that you're making. And you'll then be able to see, am I giving myself slack for the little things? Or am I modeling to a higher standard so that they will then do the same with their teams? I had the opportunity to spend that next entire week with my dad, most of it bedside at the hospital. And when he had the energy, I asked him questions about his journey, and he told me stories, and I wanted to soak it up because I knew in my heart that it may be the last time that I had the opportunity to do that. And I also had a news story to tell. I'd never talked with my dad about, people that I dated, and that night that I'd gotten to the wedding, I was having a beer with a good friend of mine. And shortly after, this beautiful gray-eyed girl comes over. And all I remember is my friend saying, "Bobby, this is Rosalind." And after that, I turned into a nervous little kid inside trying to keep my cool. Well, I told my dad all about this girl. And 3 weeks after I spent that last week with my dad, his story ended, and I said goodbye. And 3 years later, I married that girl that I met at the wedding.